One of the many perks of living out in the wilderness is that you're going to encounter a lot more wildlife than you would if you lived in a more heavily populated area. Like, until I moved down here in Arkansas, I had never seen a bluebird. Saw my first one here, and even though they are native to Illinois where I was from, in 40 years I never once saw one. That's how decimated their populations have become. So I wanted to talk about a couple of big birds that I encounter on a daily basis out here. The first one is a pileated woodpecker, which is the largest species of woodpecker in the U.S. And I'm not kidding. This guy's got to stand like a solid 18 inches tall. He's a true monster. And I almost always hear them before I see them because, you know, most woodpeckers when they do their pecking, it's a quick motion like a din 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 din. Whereas with him, it's more slow and forceful. So it's like a boosh, boosh, boosh. And it sounds like somebody's driving a heavy duty nail into a tree with a sledgehammer. That's just so immediately when I'm doing something and I hear that sound, I know exactly where he's at. And then at night, I hear barred owls all the time. And you very commonly know their sound that ooh 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 ooh. You know, it's a familiar sound. But a lot of times too, they'll make a sound that reminds you of a small child's voice. And man, is that creepy. You know, out in the woods in the middle of the night and you hear like a little child's voice saying something like that. That's the stuff nightmares are made out of. If you've ever heard it, you know what I'm talking about. So I've heard it enough times that when it happens, I recognize it pretty quickly, but still, every single time initially when I hear it, it gives me a little bit of a jump, man. It's like something out of a horror movie. But there's also a lot of other critters that make human-like noises. Um, Bobcats, mountain lions, and red foxes all kind of sound kind of like a woman screaming. They can make that kind of sound. The other night I was just sitting in the cabin reading, and I heard what sounded like a yelling off in the distance. So I actually stepped outside to listen because it sounded like there was a raving lunatic out in the distance yelling. And when I listened more closely, I think what it was a red fox. I'm not totally sure, but you can tell that after listening to it a little bit, it was an animal, not a human. But it's worth getting acquainted yourself with these sounds because when it happens, it makes you wonder what kind of sounds these are. And it kind of scares a lot of people about going out in the wilderness because of things like that. If they've had experiences camping and heard a sound like that, it really terrifies them. But, you know, part of what reduces your fears is education and learning. So like when people are afraid of spiders or snakes, which are common phobias, I would recommend get yourself a book and read it about snakes. You know, that way you're learning more, but you're not actually in touching distance. You know, it's not going to trigger that fear for you. And by learning why their anatomy is the way it is, you know, what purpose they serve in the ecosystem, how to identify between different species and which ones are poisonous and which are not, you know, it's going to help you out. So maybe it's never going to completely remove that fear of yours, but at least you go out and you see a little garter snake out in your garden, it's not going to, you know, totally scare you or nothing. You're going to be like, okay, he just belongs there. He's going to be a lot more welcome because of his pest control than let's say that cute little bunny that comes around. You know, you leave that bunny a little alone time out in your garden, man, he's going to be naughty. So if you want to attract those woodpeckers and owls, and you should, They're pretty awesome, you know, and predators are a sign of a healthy ecosystem. Both species like that make their habitats inside of dead standing trees. So if you can, try to leave some. I understand most people want to cut down a dead tree, and there's a number of reasons why that needs to be done. But let's say you got an area off in your back 40, you got a dead tree back there. It ain't hurting nothing. You know, just leave it there because it's going to provide habitat for all kinds of species of critters that are helpful additions to the ecosystem. So, you know, educate yourself about your local wildlife, the sounds they make, and what purpose they serve. By learning about them, it's going to allow you to get out in nature and experience it with less fear than you would have otherwise. You know, that way you can really get out and experience all the wonderful things your world has to offer.